Welcome back to the Let's Talk Vibes podcast, where we speak soul contracts, illumining the path to higher understanding. We're your hosts, Lauren and Yiannah, and this week we are joined by a very special guest, Rizwana Virdee. Hello, Riz.
Hello.
Hi.
Well, Riz is an integrative psychotherapist with over 20 years of experience specializing in complex trauma, attachment-focused EMDR. She blends psychotherapy with psycho-spiritual practices such as past life regression, hypnosis, divine healing, and of course, the soul contract system to foster deep healing, ensuring a holistic mind, body, soul approach. She's also the author of Become Smarter, Not a Martyr, a unique read-aloud self-hypnosis book that empowers readers to overcome the victim mindset. Recently, Rizwana launched Transcend Wellness London, a center where she integrates life enhancement technology into her therapeutic practice. Well, Riz, what an amazing bio that you have here.
Oh, bless you. Thank you very much. I will add that Nicholas did help with refining the name of my book. So I did have a couple of different versions of it, but we went through all the numbers together to make sure that it worked out.
Do you want to share what frequencies you actually ended up with? Do you remember?
Oh, well, 17.8 comes to mind straight away. It must have been a 10.1 at least. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
And bless her, my daughter designed the cover of the book.
Oh, I love
So
that.
yeah, it was good teamwork.
Well, it's funny because, we have you here today. We're going to be doing a deep dive on the 2-2 energy, which I'm so excited for. But as soon as I read that title, I was like, well, that's 3 energy, right? That lesson and like that victimhood, being a martyr. I was like, well, that's the 3.
Well, I have a 3 in my chart
I thought
somewhere.
you must. What about a 19-1 with that opening of a center?
Yes, I
Yeah.
have a 19.1. I have 4 double 9s as well. And of course, I have a 2-2 in my physical goals. I have an 11-2 in my spiritual karma, a 20-2 in my physical goals, and a 20-2 in my spiritual goals.
Wow.
So much 2 energy.
I'm a big 2 fan. I live and
Yeah.
breathe the 2 energies, I have to say.
And the 2-2 is one of the more rare combinations, unlike maybe the 3-3 or the 4-4, where a person really could just have that in their chart. Most often, if someone's going to have a 2, it is the 11-2 or the 20-2. So you are one of those rare people who actually has the 2-2 in their chart.
Yeah, very much so. And, it's all about resilience. And, if you want to talk to anybody about resilience, you can come to me. I can tell you that. So if we think about resilience and the essence of the 2, it's not just about surviving the tough times. It's about how we adapt and we transform and face, life's challenges. So in my work, I often see resilience as a central theme. That quality helps us bend without breaking. So when working with a lot of my clients, rather than just working on the oak tree, on the trunk and the branches, I'm actually working with the roots and the deep roots and making sure that they go really deep and are very resilient to whatever storm system comes our way. So yeah, that resilience is very much deeply connected to the energies of the 2-2.
That 2 energy is also in the Hebrew alphabet, it's bet, right? And bet actually means house. And it's very much like this, your body, it's as if like we're this aspect of heaven on earth, and our body, the human being is the house on earth. Okay. And so a lot of that resilience energy comes with or the 2 energy comes with like people that feel supported by you, right? And as the house, the structure of a home is very supportive. You come in, you feel warm, you're protected, you're in shelter, you feel and you have what you need. And so there's very much this, people just feel supported and loved, like almost nurtured by you. Like they know they can come to you and you will help them in some sort of way. So with that resilience, and I think those 2 kind of go hand in hand, right? Because while this 2 energy is a very resilient energy, in a karmic aspect, like you have experienced, there's a lack of resilience. There's a lack of I don't want to say common sense, but almost like the very
Yeah,
basic stuff. Yeah, total. See, it has this connotation and it's not meant to be. I have an 11 too in my spiritual goals. And so I've made those foolish decisions. I've stepped into that resiliency, that wisdom, that like, you know what? Take a step back and let it simmer. You don't have to react right away. You don't have, because I'm kind of all or nothing, right? As we blend in all the other energies of my chart, I'm very like, when I'm done, I'm done. When I'm in, I'm in. I give it all. But part of that foolishness is making kind of emotional, rash decisions. And so when you step into that emotional resiliency, you know what? I don't need to react right now. I don't need to make a decision. I can just sit with it, look at the bigger picture, and figure out what is the best possible outcome, the best way to move forward. And I think a lot of that, we know, like, you're not just born with that. Like, you have to do trial and error to get to that space.
Well, if you think about it, Yiannah, from a soul contract perspective, that's exactly what we're supposed to do. So the soul has chosen, I will come into this earth with these particular energies, and then I will work towards working through them, transmuting them. So if I've come into the world with my 2/2s, there has been a real lesson in order for me to learn to transmute that foolishness into wisdom, to become objective, to be able to take an aerial view of my life and make decisions based on that. But what I find the interesting thing is, in my practice, I don't take notes. I draw mind maps. So from a very typical 2/2 perspective, I look at all my clients' lives from an aerial view, and my brain is able to join the dots, and then I can work out at what point on this map we've got a trauma here, we've got an issue here, we've got this going on here, how it all links, and it all absolutely makes sense. So when I'm able to take an aerial view of my clients' work, it really does help in the way that I am able to transmute the qualities of my 2/2 in order to be of service to my clients. So yeah, absolutely. So going back to your coiled, cushioned bet, the symbolism is, it's all full of potential energy. It represents the duality and the balance and the male and the female, or the yin and yang existence. It reminds us that our life is all about ebbs and flows, and then just finding the balance and the equilibrium in that is the key. So it also speaks of an interconnectedness, just as that loop of the coil is connected, our actions and our decisions are interwoven in all of that around us. And that emphasizes the importance of relationships and finding harmony in those interactions. So in my practice, I have found that being able to make the space for others to come in, move around in that male and female energy within the space of that therapeutic session, it really does allow self-reflection, integration, the work. And I bring the soul contract work into every single one of my clients' work in order to bring more evidence into what we're dealing with. So let's say a client walks in and they tell me their story. A few sessions down the line, I will introduce the soul contract, and then they will be able to see the correlation between what the numbers are sharing and what the story that they have shared, and how it absolutely makes sense. So what the soul contract work allows me to do is to become more focused with the client, that these are the challenges, these are the talents that we're going to use in order to meet those challenges, and these are the goals that we're going to have to eventually activate for the whole system to work. And I've seen it over the years, time and time again. It just works fantastically, and it just allows me to become more focused, and the client to become more focused, that we're here to do this particular job. And over time, it's also become really clear how the physical karmic aspects of somebody's chart, they are able to work through that and absolutely get to a place where they are now stepping into the spiritual aspect of their chart and being able to then move towards the reason why the soul actually came here for, you know. So it's a really fascinating way to work through that. And I use past life regression in order to go back to support the challenges that they've brought into this lifetime, and how we can work through that in order to transmute the mission in a way, in a much more turbocharged way, you could say. So
Yes. So
it's absolutely fascinating.
it is. And what you made a really good point, that you wait a few sessions before you introduce the numerology, because everything that shows up in your reality is in your chart, whether it's in the letters of your name or one of the 7 aspects. For example, we all sit here. We know that Beth, the number 2, is associated with the right eye. Well, you both have glasses on. I've had LASIK. I used to have contacts. And so clearly, because we all have vision issues with the eyes, you know that before you even look at somebody's contract, there is a 2 frequency somewhere in their chart, because every part of your reality, that frequency has to live within you. So it is so wonderful. Like you, I'm very much the same. I want to hear when you speak to me, there are words, there are things you say, there are examples you give where I'm like, here are these frequencies. And before you even open up a chart, I mean, we do this in all of our episodes with Lauren when we have guests outside of this work.
Yeah.
Well, we're like, this, and this is showing up. And the beauty of that is, it's not just, well, here's your issues, have a good day. There is all of this recommendations, ways to break through it. We say all the time, you don't have to be stuck. And especially with this frequency being so resilient as it is. But as we go back to the main lesson being foolishness to wisdom, you have to make those mistakes. You have to be foolish, because through those mistakes is where we gain that wisdom. You're not born into wisdom. You're not born being wise. You become wise through the lessons and mistakes that you make. And what did you learn from it? What came out of it? And so it's just the way it all ties together is just absolutely insane.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. Yeah. And
I know. I
sometimes
love that, like a therapist like you exists, right? I find there are so many spiritual people, and, they do also need counseling, but it can be so hard because it's like, this is such a big part of your life. And if that practitioner is also not spiritual, sometimes it's like, oh, almost have to hide this. I'm not sure how you're going to accept. Are you going to think that I'm crazy when I'm telling you about some of these experiences that I've had? So I love that you are that type of practitioner that so many people would be looking for, as more people have these awakenings, to be able to use, these different modalities and to get the therapy that you need, get the counseling, get the help, but to be open into where more support can come from. Because, I'm a big believer that one of the biggest benefits the soul contract gives you is simply the awareness of the patterns that are existing, and as someone who studied linguistics, I know it is easier for you to recognize something when you have language for it. And so I find that I've talked about this on the podcast before. It is so much easier for me to recognize things that before I was doing very unconsciously, because I have the soul contract wording to say, oh, this is that number. So now I can really sit and just have this moment of reflection. Okay, that's what's going on. Now that I know that, what do I want to do? Right. And that's part of the, as Yiannah talks about, not getting stuck. Because I just think being able to be like, ooh, okay, before I go spiral down this, this energy vortex, if you will, it's like, oh, wait, okay, that's what's going on. Okay, now I can catch myself. I can stop myself. I can consciously choose another path, or simply to have the self-acceptance of, okay, this is why this is hard for me. I came for this to be a lesson, and it wouldn't be a lesson if it was easy or natural, right? Something else would.
Absolutely.
Okay. Do we want to get into, let's kind of break it down, some of the challenge aspects of this frequency, right? We talked about lack of judgment. lack of fine resiliency, for lack of a better word. Something you touched on, Riz, was the not being able to tell the difference between like the duality factor, right? Good and bad. And I think that's really important because it can show up as simple as like, if you're hanging out with the wrong crowd, or if you're making decisions that you know are not good for you, but you're just doing it anyway because, well, everyone else is doing it and I want to do it too, and I want to be part of something. And it's like not really understanding, is this safe for me or is this dangerous? Is this right for me or is this not? Like, how is this serving me? And in a karmic placement of challenge, it shows up where you kind of just don't know and you're just doing the things without even thinking about, well, should I be doing this thing? Should I be making this decision? Right? What else do you want to add into that?
Well, you're absolutely right. And I think what comes alongside that is indecisiveness, which is also a very common struggle for the 2/2s. You know, those with those vibration can find themselves often paralyzed by the fear of making the wrong decision. It can lead to overthinking, it can lead to hesitation, it can lead to a deep desire to avoid conflict. So that's the foolishness. I'll go with the flow, and I'll deal with whatever comes through with that later. You know, so
Been there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other struggle or the other challenge with the 2/2 is a tendency towards dependency. And we can talk about that a little bit further down the line. You know, that real need for approval and validation from others, which is, again, like what you just said, Yiannah, I'll just go with the crowd because, you know, there's a real need to belong. That leads to a self-doubt, and that can lead to your lack of self-worth. And it's so closely tied to how others perceive you. So there's an emotional sensitivity that comes with that. And I think that needs to be really worked with from an internal way, from a very compassionate place, because otherwise you just stay with constantly feeling vulnerable and being easily hurt and overwhelmed by negative emotions and criticism. So
right, and that oversensitivity, I can't take criticism. Even if it's constructive criticism, it's one of those where the way it comes off is you are attacking me, and right away I can't handle it. I can't see it. I can't take the advice. I can't do any of that. You're like shut off to that. And so that is such a huge component to that. I remember being younger and feeling all that. If you were to judge or criticize a single thing about me, it hit me really, really hard, right? That oversensitivity. And there was moments where, right, we talk about this, I was going to say if it's an 11 too, right, that empathic thing, the empathic energy, but it is, you're taking on other people's perspectives, other people's ideas and thoughts about you, and it's like you can't handle it. And I will tell you, I have a beautiful girlfriend. She has taught me so much just by being friends with her. And I remember years ago, I was in and out of this one relationship, and her and I, every day we'd go walking after work. We didn't have kids. Like, you know, you could do whatever you want when there's no kids. And we'd get up and we'd get on the track. And one day I'd say, oh, I'm so done with him, I'm over. And she'd say, okay, honey, I agree with you, I support you. And then the next day I'd be like, oh, but I really miss him, or I love him, or whatever. And I think I might want to give it another chance. She'd say, okay, if that's what you feel is right for you. And I remember in that moment, this is a beautiful quality of that too. She didn't judge me. She didn't judge me from going back and forth, like switching every single day. She allowed me to be who I am. She allowed me to feel my feelings and go through the motions with zero judgment. And I remember this was like a few weeks in. I remember consciously thinking to myself that she was doing this and allowing me to be who I was without judgment. And that is who I wanted to be. And I know that that was part of me stepping into that two frequency and that positive aspect where I was like, you know what? I want to be a supportive to other people the way she is to me. Because whether I was making the right decision or not, she was able to help walk me through it in such a loving, supportive way, as if she was my counselor. You know, a lot of times our girlfriends, our closest friends, our family, they are our counselors. because that's who you go to, that's who you lean in. And I thought, oh, that's who I want to be. And so
she modeled
yes,
to you
yes,
what that looked like. So she
yeah,
reflected that back to you. So you were like, I want to be a little bit more her.
100%. I
Yeah.
want to not judge. I want to not have an opinion. I want to just support you.
Mm.
Obviously, if you're doing something dangerous or really wrong, I'm going to share that. But that kind of support, that is that two frequency, right? It's like people just come into your space and they just feel so supported, and they can walk away having some kind of growth, some kind of understanding and learning about them. And that's who she was for me. And so I took that in and I was like, that's who I want to be. Right.
That's really lovely.
Yeah, she has absolutely changed my life. And when I tell her, she's like, "Oh, come on, stop." And I'm like, "No, really, that is what you've done for me." You know, it's just, it's such a blessing, such a blessing.
So if I can just backtrack just a few steps, Yiannah, when you were talking about your sensitivity and your overthinking, and you were always like that, from a complex trauma informed perspective, I would question that. I would go back and I would ask you, so tell me a little bit more about what was going on for you at the time when you felt, that the overthinking was happening, the oversensitivity, the criticism, what was happening in your environment at the time. And most of the time, there would have been stuff that would have happened that would have reinforced maybe the overthinking, the sensitivity that you would have carried through the rest of your life. So working through that or exploring that maybe on a little bit of a deeper level, whether it's through the EMDR or any other tool that I may use, I would use my tutus to see if I could encourage you to come in a little bit more into that space, and let's explore it, in a really gentle, empathically challenged way, and see what we can find. And again, if it doesn't belong in this current life, what have you brought in from a previous lifetime that you need to work through, from an overthinking, maybe a codependency, it could be a not liking the criticism, or not accepting the feedback. Where does it all sit? It comes from somewhere. Like you said, we're not born with these things, so it's come from somewhere. And me being of a very curious nature, I would encourage my client to, let's go on a little adventure and explore, to see what we can find. And most of the time, well, I won't say most of the time, every time, people are open to the idea of that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, I think if you're coming to somebody like a counselor, one foot's already in the door. You're likely to do different things. I would say for me, it was more that self-reflection. Right. And so I've got that 14 in my chart. It was very much like, why does this keep happening? Why am I doing this? How can I dig into it? And I'm also of the belief, and I don't believe I've ever shared this on this platform before, but I am of the personal belief that I don't believe in past lives. I think, as we kind of all know, we're living all our lives at the same time, right? So it's just a term. I think it's mislabeled, but it works for what it is. I actually think that the same frequencies, the same personality, the same challenges and gifts are working out through all of the lifetimes, right? So I don't think that you're experiencing something completely different in a different lifetime. I think it's the same energies, they're just showing up differently. And I think you work at them together. And so for me, right, because for me, it was a lot of, I realized I was very sensitive. I also have fives in my chart. I realized I was very sensitive. I had that codependency, and it all had to come back to that self-love. Why do I need the acceptance of somebody else? Why can't I handle criticism? That's just somebody's opinion. Whether it's right or wrong, it's okay. They're allowed to express it. And I literally had to work through these moments of not even realizing I was doing the work. But each time I'd feel that oversensitivity or that initial shock, which that two frequency feels, I would sit with it and I'd go, okay, why am I feeling this way? Take a deep breath. allow it to come through, and just see how it shows up for you, see how you feel. You don't have to accept everything. And so that has really, it's like I was my own counselor.
Yes. Yes.
And that really shifted things for me, because we know part of this too, they can, in a challenge aspect, they can have a really difficult time with failure, right? If I
Yes.
can't, or when big things happen, it rocks their world. It rocks that house foundation. And it's like, okay, I realize this has happened to me. How can I shift that? I want to be strong within who I am. And I could say today that I feel very confident in who I am, and you can't rock my foundation.
Mm,
Now, that
mhm,
doesn't mean that I'm done with my growth. I will always continue to grow.
mm.
But from where I was even 10 years ago, I was like, who was that woman? Like,
Yeah.
she didn't get all of that, you know? Um, but yeah, it's a journey. It's a
Mm,
journey, and most of us can't do it for ourselves. So having someone in this supportive role, in a counselor role, whether it's formal or informal, is a huge game changer. Huge.
mm,
Because it puts a lot of things into perspective for this somebody with this frequency who also struggles.
mm. Well, the reality is you need somebody who will challenge your perspective, and otherwise you're going to be going around doing the same circles. You're trying to, if I use the analogy, you're trying to use iPhone 16 functionality on an iPhone 7. It won't work.
Right.
You've got to upgrade yourself, even though that, the functionality's there, but you're just like, how come it's not working? You haven't done the upgrade. So, and the other I think important factor is, which you touched on earlier, and I just want to add, Yiannah, you sound like you have a very good self-reflective process.
Mhm.
And when we have the ability to reflect and look back and think back and question ourselves, we're already in a way halfway there.
Yep.
You're prepared to be a little bit more open-minded.
Yes.
You're able to join the dots more, and doing the growth is so much more, I won't say quicker, but deeper and
Yes.
stronger.
Hmm.
Yeah, and what I say to my clients sometimes, it's like you haven't made an appointment. Your souls hadn't made an appointment to be here today,
Mm.
because it's the soul's drive to be more, to want more, to expand, to transcend. So because coming into therapy and facing yourself, I would say, is probably the most courageous thing anyone can ever do. So it's not for the faint-hearted to sit and really dig that deep and explore and be honest with yourself. And I think being honest with yourself is probably one of the most hardest things to do. But to do that in the safety of the bed, the two coiled cushion, makes it even more spacious and contained and safe.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because as I've been listening, I was just like reflecting for myself because as soon as you talked about the like sensitivity, especially to criticism, I was like, yes, so true, so relatable. And I actually really poignantly remember after I graduated college, like that summer, I did a learning to teach English course, and they had interviewed us and we're asking about like, well, like, how do you take criticism? And I was like, I'll be honest, I'm not always like super good at it. I have the awareness that that's not my strong suit. Like, but then I really do remember that during the class itself, because I think genuinely, this was such a new thing for me. And I'm one of those people that it's like when I'm not good at something, I often don't try, right? You don't give yourself that time to be a beginner because
Mm,
it's like you're not necessarily going to be great yet. And I'm not always great at that, that's not always comfortable for me. But I do remember it was like this first time in my life that it was just like, I am so eager to be better. Yes, please
mm,
tell me what I can do to be better. And I don't know if it was just something about them and their personalities as well. And that like I never once felt like I was being criticized. It was just like,
mm,
and I think again, it is part of how they were giving it. Like, here's what you're doing great. Here's what you can do next time to be even better, And so like
mm.
that didn't feel like a criticism because again, as I was listening to you, I was like, why do I do that? And I was like, well, it's your 10-1. You're a perfectionist. It's super
Yeah,
self-critical. And so if you're not perfect, you don't want
yeah,
to try. You don't want to allow yourself to get good. It's like, I'm not already perfect. And because I already think that I'm perfect, why would you criticize me? What is there to criticize? It's like, oh no, if you criticized me, that I have failed at being perfect.
Well, and that's the thing, right? The twos, there's a little bit of that lack of self-confidence, right?
Mm.
You're hitting my self-worth, you're hitting me where in a way that really rocks me. And I
Mm.
think what happens is, even if you feel confident, we all know this, like we get healing or like we have like sessions and I'm like, I didn't even realize that was an issue for me, right? Until you start doing that work. And you
Mm.
may feel confident, you may feel fine, but then all of a sudden somebody will say something that will rock you and shifts and knocks down your confidence. And you're like, wait a minute. And that is why the more you come, the more mistakes you make, unfortunately, fortunately for this frequency, the more times you mess up, the better the possibility
Yes.
of stepping into that wisdom. Otherwise, you're never going to learn or grow in that aspect. And that is how you can build that self-confidence. That's why, like, I always search. I'm like, which frequency is it really that builds that confidence?
Mm.
Because even like I'll use me for example, I consider myself to be I'm confident in who I am. I always have been, even when I've been hit down,
Mm.
even when I did something I shouldn't have done, or I really messed up in a big way, or I just can't do something that I thought I could do. But at the core of it, I still feel confident. Is it the two frequency in a positive aspect that really gives us that confidence, or is it a combination of things?
I really
Yeah.
like when you say confidence, the first place I go is the 3. And the second place I go to is the 4. Those are the ones to
Mm.
me that are just so much about confidence. I think for the 3, it's a lot of lessons in building confidence. Like I don't actually necessarily think the confidence is often there to begin with. It's about
Mm.
the lessons to build the confidence. And for the 4, I feel like the confidence tends to be really innate because of the sun. That's how I always think about it for myself. Like, I'm this type of person who is almost like delusionally confident and yet like feels like my self-worth is like in the toilet at the same time, right? I'm just like totally like, oh my God, I'm the best. I'm the best ever. I'm just wonderful and amazing. And then, 10-1, you go to the next extreme in the next
Mm.
moment. And it's like, I am unworthy.
Oh my gosh.
Right. And like, and so it's that, I think, again, that's why I think about it with the confidence, because it's so, for me, tied to self-worth. And your
Mm.
self-worth is so key with both of those numbers, the 3 and the 4.
I agree with you. Well, I think there's one point. I think all the numbers help us build our confidence in one way or another.
Right.
All of them will add, the more we transmute all our contract, the more confident we'll become over time, because a lot of it is rooted in a lack of self-worth, a lack of worthiness. So, for example, the 4-4, with it being a number of abundance, it's a connection to the divine, that the pot of abundance is big enough for all of us. We've got to feel confident and sure enough and connected enough to just dip our own hand in and take our share of that
Yeah.
abundance, you know. So yeah, and the 3-3, I have a 3-3 in my chart as well as and a 5-5 like you, Yiannah. So it is about taking harsh lessons and just becoming more robust over and over again, and taking that work and then using it. I have a 12-3 in my soul destiny in my birth name. So I have a very active, focused challenge to make sure I bring in the balance of the physical and the spiritual. And when I was talking earlier about telling my clients or bringing in the soul contract work down the line, it's more about bringing in the psychotherapeutic work in first to ground them, really bring them in and ground them. Even if they're spiritual, they still need to be grounded. We need them to be able to be grounded enough to understand and acknowledge and transmute the physical karmic aspects of them, for them to then, even though it all works in tandem at the same time, there is something very, I would say, tangible about working through the physical aspect for them to really step into the true mission as to why they are actually here. And I see that over time. You know, in order to move forward, we've got to go back to see what happened. And then when I've worked with what's already happened, very naturally, clients become more and more present, and they are able to, you know, in a way, become more conscious of what's actually going on. And then even the language, they start to change about, they just come across more present. And then they start talking about a lot more about what's happening now in their lives and where they want to go rather than where they've been.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
You know?
that self-awareness is literally more than half the battle, is what I feel like.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
even if you, for example, for this two frequency, if you keep making foolish decisions, but now you become consciously aware that I'm making foolish decisions, you may still make them, but now you're like, oh, I know this is not the right thing to do, but I'm still going to do it. And then that will lead to, I know this is not the right thing to do for me, and I'm not going to do it. And so it builds this build up of, I know the right thing to do now. I know the wise decision, the better decision that will actually serve me instead of hinder me in life. And so that awareness is so without awareness, what do you got? Nothing. You need that awareness to make that change. And that is often very difficult. I would say probably the most difficult aspect, because if you're not even aware that you're doing this thing, if I got 3s and 5s, I can talk all day long. I can talk over you all day long. But if I'm not aware that I'm doing that, I'm never going to change that behavior. But knowing that my 3s just want to just share, never stop talking. And I have to say this thing while you're talking, I'm trying to think of what I want to say. I'm like, no, just take a seat, girlfriend. Just relax. If it's important, you'll get the opportunity. You'll share it. Just, you know, so it's bringing that self-awareness, which is going to shift everything. Right?
Yes, absolutely. Because what does the self-awareness do? You know, there will be a benefit to that. And what that is it builds trust. It builds trust within self. And then the more that you build trust within self, obviously, you know, the overflow of that will be confidence. You're going to be able to become more assertive. You're going to be able to become more objective, more decisive. And, you know, starting with making small, achievable goals is going to help you get there, because it's creating the trust within. So the awareness will help you build the trust within self, and then that's more about the connection with the divine on the broader scale. So that's really, really powerful to balance that sensitivity with each goal that you're going to make over time. Bring in that sensitivity and understanding that. So yeah.
Now, it's interesting because, you know, again, we were talking about before, one of the key aspects of this number is the resilience. How does one build resilience? Like, how do you even work on establishing that with clients? Because I know it's sort of like, again, until you start to build it up, it almost feels like that's an impossible goal. If you've never sort of felt like you've had, you know, you're talking about the roots, right? If you feel like every gust of wind forever knocked you over, it's almost like you can't imagine being able to withstand that.
Well, I would say, Lauren, first of all, like I said earlier, you've made an appointment with your soul. So for you to just make the appointment and come and ask for support is resilience. Yeah. I mean, that's in of itself. I've come here, I want support. I need to be more than I am. I need to be in a better place in my life. I cannot continue to feel the way I do. That's resilience. That comes from somewhere innate, that you've brought yourself to a very supportive but challenging place, and I'm prepared to go there. Like I said, it's not for the faint-hearted. So, you know, learning practices like mindfulness, meditation, journaling can help with the two, very powerful. You know, making a space to for that self-awareness, for that integration to take place, for that emotional processing. So all of that will help to build on the resilience. But just knowing that you've just made an appointment to get to the first session is resilience. Because
Brilliant.
you've already told yourself that I want more, but it doesn't come from the human. It comes from a soul drive that, as a human, I cannot continue in the way that I am operating.
And for me, what I see it as, you know, especially in how this shows up in my life, is about the nervous system regulation. You know, I see these as so strongly connected, especially in that when I was going through, I don't know if it would have been a universal 2-year, it was a personal 2-year. Yeah, I think it would have been a personal 2-year because I was recently. Just like that was the big thing, and that was ended up being the tool, was essentially a tool to help address the nervous system regulation. And then as I was working on that, I could see, you know, in my job, when it was sort of like, okay, you're suddenly needing to shift gears really, really quickly. You know, I've been super, super focused on one thing, and now you have to put that down and go do this other thing speedy, right? That was so hard for me. And so that kind of became my barometer and my test. I was doing something called neurofeedback, which is to reset your nervous system. It's like, okay, how did that feel? Like physically, how did my body react to that request, you know, yesterday compared to a month ago, you know, or even compared to last week, you know, things like that. And that to me was the biggest tool in kind of moving things forward. And everyone's going to have what works best for them in terms of that specific modality or whatnot. But that was the big thing for me, was just like, actually, how did my heart rate feel when that was asked of me? You know, was that able to be calm, or did that go shooting up because I was like, ah?
And having the awareness of the body, I think, is so important, Lauren. You know, I work with so many people who are literally cut off, and they keep to the safety of the head, and trying to rewire the system between the body and the mind, and eventually, you know, the soul. It takes time, because when I do body therapy, it's fascinating to see how people have just, I mean, we store everything on a cellular level. Our bodies hold every single moment in time we have ever had on a cellular level. The body never lies. It never does. But the information that comes from the body, when we allow it to communicate, it's quite phenomenal. I mean, when we were talking at the intro about my wellness center that I'm opening up, using the life enhancement technology, I've got a piece of technology in my practice at the moment before I take it to the center, because it's just a game changer. It's an electromagnetic frequency mat. And so I've encouraged my clients, let's, you know, use this and see what happens. And so these are my 5 5s, you know, this pioneering innovation coming through. So the lying on the pulsed electromagnetic frequency mat puts the client straight into their parasympathetic. So it really relaxes the nervous system. It allows the body to open up a bit more. It takes the stress away. It reduces any inflammation. And then whether I'm doing EMDR or if I'm doing body therapy, it just has such profound levels of shift. It's just amazing. So being able to, you know, navigate people's process in that way is just so humbling. I suppose it's such a privilege to be able to work with people, and then being so open to that. You know, it's fantastic. It really is.
Now, on a positive aspect, so somebody who has the 2 2s, like in a talent position, something like that, you get lots of, what you see is fine. We touched on that resilience, right? But they're also very patient people, very loving, kind people, very they bounce back really easily when something big happens, or they make a mistake, or something could rock their world. Like, if for me, I have it in a goal position, you have it in a karmic position, it could rock us harder. Somebody who has this in a positive talent position can be like, okay, you know what? I failed at this. It didn't work out. The relationship, the business, whatever it was, that's okay. I'm going to move on because I learned from it. They can move on really easily. And I think that is something that, and I want to preface, we've said this many times before, just because something's in a karmic position, a position of challenge, doesn't mean you are forever going to be in that challenge. The
Yes.
goal is to shift out of it and go into the positive aspect, to grow and to just, we're not meant to be stuck in the mud. And
Yes.
so even if something rocks your world now, building that inner confidence, that inner love, that inner support is what's going to help you bounce quickly from major things kind of like showing up in your life. Right. And especially like people in that 35 to 42-year window, they're experiencing their dark night of the soul, their midlife crisis, every door closing, everything kind of going wrong. You can either very easily fall into fear and chaos, or you can say, you know what? Fine, these doors are closing. I guess other ones are going to open, and I'm going to wait for that to open, which is not easy to do.
Yeah.
But the more you allow yourself to just let it go and shift the perspective, shift focus, because that's what the two does, right? It's that perspective energy. The more you can shift that perspective and that focus, the more you can step into that quick transition into the next thing without letting it bring you fully down. Right? What other positive aspects do we have? Very loving, very wise, very supportive. You see counselors with this energy, right?
Yes.
Like, right? So we see that very intuitive counseling too, like you, and the way that you do your work. It's also very intuitive. You have your structure, but it's very intuitive, right? They can see the larger picture, right? That bird's
very
eye
much
view.
so.
Yes. And so when people who struggle with that, they don't have the foresight to be able to see what's coming up or what the bigger picture is. They can only focus on the now. And I think that's when a lot of mistakes happen too.
And that's interesting that you use that word, because I think a lot of the resilience is also built with working with the beauty of hindsight. When we work with hindsight, we can bring a lot more trust, awareness, and resilience into the space. And then from hindsight, we then move into a place of midsight, where we're in it, but we can get ourselves out of it quicker as well, or we can see it. I'm in it and I can see this is how this is going to unfold. So you become a lot more aware and able to give yourself a choice. And then you have the ability to either react or respond. And then over time, you work and find out you have the ability of foresight. So foresight is, I know it's coming. I'm not even going to go there. I can see that hole in the road and I'm going to walk around it because I can see it coming. So over time, you can build resilience by working on what you've already know, where you are and where you're going. So it really does make a big difference to understand that it really is a process that you are going through. It's not just something that's happening to you. So and you've got your own process, everyone's individual process. So if you were to, ask me, how do I work with X, Y, and sometimes it's very difficult because I don't know until I'm working with your process and I'm taking an aerial view of your life. So it's very, very, very fascinating.
I would love to hear from you, Riz, about twos and relationships and what you have observed, because that's something we kind of know as practitioners, is the way that twos are in relationships can tend to have some struggles. Those can be some difficult relationships, both in terms of just who they end up attracting is maybe not the best sort of foundations of a partner to begin with. But then also, especially with the 11-2 is sort of known for like having these codependent relationships. So I'd love to hear someone who I'm sure has witnessed a breadth, of clients
time
with
and time,
twos, and talk to us more about
it's
that.
very, very fascinating. And I'll tell you what adds to the fascination is the overlay, the soul contract overlay. When we get the names in of the partners or the dynamic of whoever they're struggling with, or even just curious about, just the overlay can inform us. And again, further down the line, when I bring in the overlay and the client says, oh my God, yes, they're exactly like that. Oh my God, I can't believe, that this
Yep.
is, it does help us to navigate the relationship. And it doesn't mean that all is, ended in this case. Stuff can be worked through. So correct me if I'm wrong, in the overlay, the other person is bringing the talent aspects in. And so it's good to be able to look at that ex-partner is bringing in, let's say, 2-2 vibration to get you to become more resilient, to get you to become more decisive, to get you to become more objective. So depending on where that falls in the chart can make a big difference. So understanding that from an overlay perspective is very, very interesting. But then that also leads me to talk to them about the 2-2, let's say, from an attachment perspective. But if we talk about attachment theory in on itself, it explores our early relationships and our connections. And it also does align beautifully with the soul contract system. So with regard to the 2-2, the challenge of the indecisiveness, it might connect to an anxious, preoccupied attachment style, where there's a constant need for reassurance. On the other hand, the deep sensitivity of the 2-2 might relate to a fearful avoidance style, where there's a desire for closeness, but a fear of vulnerability. So they kind of keep you at arm's length. So understanding the connections can offer, quite a profound insight into how we relate to others and to ourselves. So as we work on developing a secure attachment with both ourselves and others, we begin to align more closely with the vibrations of our chart. We can use them to help us become more securely attached because the numbers in our chart will also indicate how we what kind of attachment style we've created and how we attach to others and what we bring in. So for example, like you were saying, Yiannah, earlier, the 14-5, it can bring a lot of intensity into relationships very quickly. So, automatically that tells me there's an anxious style of attachment there. And what was the other one? I can't remember. So with a 4-4, let's say, if that's in a karmic position, that can bring quite an avoidance style because there's quite narcissistic traits that are associated with the 4-4. It's all about me, very self-absorbed. So there's so you may find that somebody with an 11-2 or a 2-2 would be very drawn to somebody with 4s in their chart, maybe, or even 5s if they're in a karmic position. So it's very fascinating to see how that gets played out, but it doesn't mean all is lost.
No.
We can still, we can still explore that, and we can still see, especially if the partner is open to wanting to work with it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
no, I have seen a lot too, like when I do relationship overlays, when I do have, because it's rare, right? That 2-2 is rare. But when you do see that 2 frequency, it's very often that partner is very basics, supportive, can be very supportive, can be very loving and kind. But back to that criticism, they could have a tough time accepting, within all relationships, when you're bringing 2 people together like that, and now you have to live together or you get married or you have children, you're going to criticize, not the right word, but you're going to point out the things that irk you about the other person, or the thing, I really need you to help me with this. I really need this to shift. I don't like the way this shows up for us. And when you're giving that kind of feedback to somebody with that too, you have to remember that sensitivity to that criticism, because they can take it like you're just coming at them, or you don't love them and you're trying to hurt them and you don't understand them. So approaching them in a manner where you are so good at this, right? It's like that, what is it, that sandwich?
Yeah.
Um,
Compliment sandwich.
yes, where you give a compliment, you throw in the thing that you really need to change, and then you toss in another compliment. That compliments sandwich is the perfect way to deliver a message like that to somebody with that two frequency. And so as a partner, it's so important to remember that, because you're like,
Mm,
I don't want to create tension. I don't want to create issues and conflict in the relationship. I just really need to share this part that I'm hoping we can work through together and create some kind of
mm.
better outcome.
Yes, absolutely. So, you know, if you're going to approach a 2-2, you want to approach them with a compassionate voice, an encouraging voice, an invitation. You know, it has to, in a way, what the what the 2-2 gives you, it doesn't like receiving, in a way, the shadow aspect back.
Mhm.
That makes sense. So it doesn't like the tone that you might be speaking to that person in. It may not like just any approach. It will not like it. So, you know, it's receiving the shadow of itself, and you know it will just not, absolutely won't like it. And there's another element to that. I mean, there's so many psychoeducational aspects that you could bring in to change the perspective, or to look at it, or to explore it from another way. But if we look at it from a fight, flight, freeze, fawn perspective, I would say anyone with a 2, not just a 2-2, but a 2 in their chart, whether it's a 22 or an 11-2, if there's criticism delivered and the other person becomes hostile, my sense is what then the 2 does, it goes into fawn. So it starts fawning to try and smooth it over, try and make it better, over eliciting their attention onto the other person. And that can also become quite dysfunctional if it's not explored, for them to understand that it's a dysfunctional way of relating. That makes sense.
Yeah. Before we do wrap up, I would love to touch on, the combination numbers that the 2 comes with. As someone
Mm,
who does have all of these different numbers in your own chart,
mm,
I feel like I would love to hear from your own experience of just how the 2 feels a little bit different when it's along with the 11 or when it's joined with the 20, and how those energies impact the 2
mm.
energy.
Well, I can honestly say that I have very consciously experienced the foolishness to wisdom, the war to peace, the what's the other one?
That's it.
Foolish,
Life
no,
to death, life to
Oh, the
death.
life to
yes,
death. Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, the death to life,
That's a
yeah,
life.
death to life, war
Yeah.
to peace, and the foolishness to wisdom. Yeah, very consciously experience that. So, and you know, continuously working to transmute them and honing them, and they become subtle over time. But it doesn't mean, you know, it's gone away. It's a constant work in progress. So the 11-2, again, it's a master number. It blends the intuitive insights of the 11 with the partnership oriented of the 2. It's about spiritual enlightenment, a deep inner knowing, a drive to serve others. So again, very drawn to the healing professions, using the heightened intuition and the guide to support others, which is why it's very important, because I've got 8s as well. So it's very important for me to very much stay grounded. And I, over the years of doing my therapeutic work for a long time, I'm very quick to be able to leave that and get on and do something very grounded. So it doesn't overlap very quickly. I'm not overwhelmed by it, if that makes sense. And the 22 vibration amplifies the qualities of the 2 with a broader sense of purpose and responsibility. It's about finding balance on a grander scale, nurturing both self and the larger community. So, you know, I very much embody the qualities of those vibrations. And it's been a very conscious journey in order to find myself here. So it just allows us to take a more expansive view of our relationships. And the 22 is also about constantly evolving. Somebody like me in my profession and just my own nature, I will never retire in the conventional way. You know, I'll just keep going and going. I'm too curious to ever stop, I think. But, you know, I may slow down in other ways, but I'll continue to evolve. You just can't help it. So,
I just had a reading with this woman who she starts off and she goes, she had this whopping 20-2, and she goes, here's what I want out of my reading. I love it. She came so prepared. And she goes, look, I'm retired, but I know that I want to do something else. I'm like, of course you do. You've got a 20-2.
yes,
Never gonna stop. You're gonna always
never.
keep going.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side of that, I complain, you know, that complain that maybe there's not enough time. That's my 12-3. I'm running out of time.
Right.
I've got all these things to do and I just don't
Yeah.
have enough time. So I have to try and balance that with, you know, an internalized mantra. You've got plenty of time. You've got all the time in the world to do it all. It's all going to be okay, Riz. You know, so all that internal reassurance. And it's just a trust, you know, really trusting, finding harmony within and around us, trusting your intuition, embracing the sensitivity. So being mindful, you know, being sensitive, I've got to be mindful of the information that I absorb, you know, who I spend time with, all of that. You know, it's about navigating the world with resilience, with grace, humility. And, you know, people ask me, you know, what's the best job in the world? I was mine. You know, I couldn't think of a better job. You know, it's such a privilege to work with people's inner world.
Yeah.
And never help them navigate that landscape. I couldn't think of a better job to do. You know,
Beautiful.
so, yeah.
That is a beautiful way to put a pin in it. Thank you so much, Riz, for joining us. This was such a beautiful insight, such beautiful conversation. Why don't you let our listeners know where they can find you?
Very easy. You can just go to my website, rizwanavirdee.com, and you'll find more than likely all the information there that you need.
And you have been working on some meditations, isn't that right? You were telling us about.
Gosh, yes. You see, I do all these things, then I forget. I forget I've done them. You know, I forget I've written a book. I forget I've done that. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for highlighting that with me. I have a YouTube channel. It's called Inside Job Dual Hypnosis, where I incorporate meditation, hypnosis with EMDR elements. So to embed even deeper the changes that we want to, and they are more attachment focused. So it's all about, you know, creating attachments, more secure attachments, fundamentally with self. So the more we can cultivate that within ourselves, obviously more of an asset we will be to the society. So what I've done, which is not online yet, but they are meditations and hypnosis for the soul contract numbers. It's a very niche playlist, of course, so it's going to be useful to people who are very much aware of the work that we do here. And at some stage, they will be available. So please feel free to listen to them at your heart's content.
Yes, so be sure to check in. By the time this episode comes out, you may have one or two or something.
I may have.
Yes.
Yes, I've got my fingers in so many pies that, you know,
Yes.
trying to find the time to focus and get it all done with the full practice. It's not easy, but then, you know, you've got a 20-2 and a 12-3 and a 9-9, you know, what do you expect of me?
Yeah. Of course. And you also did us the honor of creating this wonderful worksheet that's available for all of our listeners. If you have a 2 in your chart or just want to go through the process of connecting with that energy, that's going to
Yes.
be in the show notes that you can download,
Oh,
print
yes.
out, and work on at your leisure.
Yes, I did that for a client who was struggling, and it's a kind of a CBT based worksheet. And I thought, well, this is fantastic. And then when you guys very graciously invited me to come and do a talk, I said, hey, let's just share it with the world. Whoever wants to use it can use it.
Yes.
So it's all about sharing. It's all about giving away the wisdom and the experience and getting everyone to be bigger and more and to transcend.
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Riz, for joining us. And everybody, thank you for listening. You can connect with us on Instagram, the Let's Talk Vibes podcast, or on our website, theltvpodcast.com.
And as always, everybody, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our content. It is the best way to support us, and we greatly appreciate it. Have a beautiful, blessed day. Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.